Hello viewers, and a warm welcome to you all. Welcome to another episode of Dinner Guide. My name is Chef Andy, and today we are going to be working with some seafood. With that mentioned, I'm going to be working with some shrimp. I'm also going to be pairing that with some couscous, and of course give it a nice beautiful zesty finish off that you will probably also be able to enjoy as well. But before I begin, I will begin by introducing the ingredients before us, just to give you an idea of what to expect for this show. Now, from the very front, you will require 1 tablespoon of some tomato ketchup, about two pieces of some ginger root that's already been washed and peeled. You also require 1 teaspoon of chili flakes and 1 teaspoon of dried oregano. You'll also require a tablespoon of some red pepper pesto and a few cloves of garlic. You'll also require a 1/4 cup of some couscous, about 200 grams of some shrimp, about 1 whole lemon, of course imported. You can also use local or even lime for this recipe. You'll also require some lemongrass, about 1 stem should do, some salt and some black peppercorns to season, 1 whole glass of water, and last but not least, some oil to cook with. For this recipe, I'm going to be working with some sesame oil. Now we're going to be taking a break very shortly, and when we do come back, we will dive right into it, which is something you definitely don't want to miss. See you in a little while. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are right about ready to start off this very simple dish, but I will of course remind you that if you actually missed out on the beginning and you'd like to recap on this and many other episodes, do make a point of logging onto or subscribing to our YouTube channel, that is BrandPlus TV Kenya. You will actually be able to trace and be able to catch up on anything that you may have missed out on, including this very show. Now, before we begin, very important to mention, we're going to be working with couscous today, a very different kind of starch. Doesn't need much cooking, so it makes it very easy for you to be able to serve this or make this in the heat of time. And of course, as I mentioned, we're all about making convenient and healthy meals, so this will particularly be in aid of those of you who are looking at cutting costs and cutting, of course, time. And this will, of course, also give you a nice, beautiful alternative to serving rice or any particular starches that you may already be accustomed to at the moment. Now, we're going to start off this process very simply by adding some water to a pot. And I'll begin to heat that and allow that to come to the boil. And now, couscous, as I mentioned, does not require any cooking. It actually just settles in with a bit of some hot water or some hot moist air. It will also be very easy to make, and it also saves you quite a bit of time in especially preparing or even doing dishes. So it is quite one of those beautiful comfort dishes that you may actually have not tried out, and I do recommend you should. Now, to begin the process, I'll begin by adding my couscous to a bowl. You can, of course, be able to do this on any particular bowl of your choice. Just be able to of course, make sure that it is, of course, heat resistant. So please try and avoid using plastic. You can, of course, go with ceramic, melamine, or even, of course, stainless steel, which, of course, will be able to retain the heat and, of course, allow the couscous to swell up very easily. Now, to that, I will proceed to season with some salt. I'll crush in some black peppercorns. And I'll also add a bit of that oregano. Actually, we'll just go with the whole amount. About a teaspoon should do to half a cup of couscous. And all you're going to do is just wiggle that a bit, allowing, of course, for the flavors to blend in very, very briefly. You can, of course, alternatively also add a bit of some chili flakes, and that will, of course, also give it a nice, beautiful, fresh color. So once you've tossed that and your water is now boiling, very, very simply proceed to remove that from the heat and begin to pour into your bowl. Of course, always making sure that your water goes about an inch over the level of your couscous. And that will, of course, aid in allowing it to soak up quite a bit of that liquid and bring it to scratch in a very, very short amount of time. So proceed to cover that with some cling film. If you don't have this available to you, you can also find any particular plastic bag that may actually be able to cover your bowl completely. But remember, the initial idea of this is basically to trap in all that hot air, and of course also to trap in the flavors, and you will actually be able to see how this will turn out in a very, very little while. So we are going to allow that to sit right behind us undisturbed. And of course, having a bit of this in your kitchen, some cling film, will always aid also in covering your meals, avoiding any contamination or any foreign bodies from affecting or infecting your meal. Now once that's done, we're going to begin preparing our prawns. So I'm going to allow that pan to heat up very, very briefly as I grab some of my ingredients. Now for this you'll require pestle and mortar, and this is basically just to pound your garlic. You can also alternatively just chop your garlic very finely on your board with a sharp knife. But of course, to get the beautiful pasty texture of the garlic, this will particularly give you quite a bit of advantage. So begin by knocking your cloves of garlic on your board. And very importantly to mention, always try and single out the skins of your garlic from the garlic cloves. And you can achieve this very simply by working on both ends of your board. And it will also make it very easy for you to distinguish between the peel and the garlic clove itself. So proceed to peel each piece, of course making sure that most or all of your skin is completely removed. You can also use your fingernails to just pinch out any bit of skin that may still be attached and proceed to discard. Right, simple as that. Very, very easy step to begin with. Right, now next up, we'll proceed to add our garlic into our mortar. I'll also proceed to just roughly chop up our ginger. This will make it very easy to combine with the garlic and to pound down to a paste. Right, so combine your garlic and ginger. Proceed to add some salt into your mortar. Remember, salt actually aids in giving the mixture a bit of texture, and it also aids in helping you to break down the mixture a little faster. So all you're going to begin with is by pounding down the ginger. And of course, also mentioning that the ginger will of course not mince very, very easily. So be sure to begin with the ginger root. Right, once those are broken down, you can now use your pestle to move around your mortar very, very gently. Of course, always pushing down any of the ingredients on the sides, and just proceed to go around in a very continuous motion. Of course, always scraping off any bits of garlic and ginger on your pesto, and of course push down the ones that are on the side of your mortar. Just proceed to do the same thing right up until you have an almost pasty consistency. Right, once that's done, be sure to wipe down your pestle to one side of your mortar, and you can now proceed to move all the ingredients to one end by tilting your mortar sideways. Of course, making sure to not waste any of your mixture. And we're going to proceed to add that to a hot pan. So proceed to heat up your pan, adding about 1.5 tablespoons of some olive oil. And proceed to add your ginger and your garlic. Scrape off completely until your mortar is completely empty. Right, simple as that. Now, of course, as I mentioned, we're going to be working with shrimp. Very important also to remind you that this does not need a lot of cooking time. It will actually cook very, very, very fast. So I'll just begin by sweating out my garlic and ginger. And this is basically to bring out the flavors. And you can proceed to fry those on a hot pan until they're almost golden brown in color. And once that is done, proceed to add just a small amount of oil. This is basically to be able to get your prawns to color or your shrimp to color very quickly. And you can tilt your pan forward and add your shrimp. Spread it out onto the surface of your pan, and you can proceed to toss that, and you will actually be able to see the color change very, very rapidly. It will actually start to turn into an almost pinkish color as it cooks. This is a very, very simple technique to tell when your shrimp is cooked. You will actually also notice that the shrimp will start to curl up. And of course, very important to mention, if you're going to be buying some frozen shrimp, be sure to always check right between the midrib. And this is basically by simple process. And I'll just grab one piece from the pan just to be able to show you. So what happens is, on purchasing of your shrimp, you will be able to find different kinds. You may find some with the tails on and the heads off. You can also find some with the tails off and the heads off, like the variety I'm using today. And what happens is, as you open up your piece of prawn onto your board, you will actually notice an incision that's been cut right over the top. And this is basically to remove a small membrane that actually holds the dirt from the prawns, which is of course the feces. And you should actually always remember to take that out, because it also carries quite a bit of an aftertaste to it. Remember, that is not particularly edible. So it's very important to always remember to check out for those. And it's very easy to distinguish, because with the white blunt color of your shrimp, you will actually notice something somewhat like a vein with some dark matter inside it. Always be sure to remove that before cooking, just to make sure you don't carry the flavor right through. Right, so our shrimp is almost done now. As I mentioned, you will notice them curling up. The color will change very rapidly, so very important to make sure not to leave this unattended. Now just keep tossing those. And now, just to fix the flavor, I'm also going to be incorporating some ketchup. This is basically just to bring some acidity to the dish. And of course a teaspoon rather of some red pepper pesto. And this is just to give it a nice beautiful overall flavor. And I'll just proceed to toast those in the pan, reducing my heat to low completely at this stage. Toast those very briefly. And once your prawns are beautifully coated in that pesto, you can slide that off the heat very briefly. And I'm going to proceed to just slice a bit of my lemon. And all I'm going to do is just squeeze that onto the pan. And what happens is the beautiful acidity of the lemons will infuse the flavors in your pan. Of course, always giving a nice, beautiful citric aftertaste to your prawns. And you will actually be able to depict that very, very quickly. And at this stage, you can turn off your heat and allow your prawns to just cool off on the side. And of course, we do have a bit of work remaining, which is of course the last and final part of plating. But I will of course take this chance to allow you to just take a break and refreshen yourselves. And when we do come back, I'll take you right through the last and final step of plating, and of course give you some serving suggestions, and of course also share with you some beautiful tips about this very simple seafood of choice that we used on the show today. So please don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. Welcome back, viewers. For those of you who've missed out on the show, we're right about at the last and final stage of plating. Now I'll be showing you a very, very simple technique of plating this as a starter, because it is intended for that purpose. And it's a very, very simple technique. I will of course begin by working on our plate of choice. So this is a particularly simple technique I use, especially when plating starters. Sometimes you do have an occasion that you have probably a very, very white plate, and you're of course looking at ways to make it a little more creative. Very, very simple technique. I'm going to begin by spooning over some pesto and some ketchup. And now using the same spoon, I'll just mix that very, very roughly at the base of your plate. And now it's a very, very simple technique. While holding your plate, of course, tilted or even on a flat surface, I'm actually going to be lifting this for you to be able to see the effect. So very, very simply with a brush, proceed to just move your brush all the way up to the sides, turn that over, and by just reconstituting the mixture to the center, proceed to do the same to the very top. Now the beautiful thing is with that you do get a beautiful ambience of color. It also carries over that beautiful flavor of the ketchup, the sweetness of the pesto, and this will all incorporate into giving your couscous a bit of a flavor. As you did notice, we actually season this very lightly, but as you consume that, you can actually be able to scoop that with a spoon, and you'll be able to recreate the moment that we are looking for. Now next up, we'll proceed to serve our couscous. And I'll just proceed to grab a spoon for that. Now very importantly, always begin by fluffing up your mixture, and by that it basically means just move a spoon around it, of course making sure that it's not very grainy or not very dry as well, and it should actually lift very, very lightly if it's properly done. And all we are going to do at this stage is spoon that into our bowl. like so. It is a very rough kind of a consistency with couscous, and it's particularly why I like to serve it with starters. It's very light, but of course if you're thinking of using it with a main course, you may actually want to alter the content a bit, because it will actually be very light and may not be very filling. Now next up, I'll also proceed to slice about 2 lemon wedges. So very simply, by holding your lemon to an angle, proceed to slice that into some 2 or 3 pieces of wedges. And you can proceed to just garnish those to one side of your plate like that. Also a very simple serving suggestion for the prawns. I've particularly grown fond of using steaks and using skewers particularly to beautify and bring a beautiful elegance to a starter. So you can of course very simply do so by grabbing a skewer, and by holding your pieces with a piece of tongs, you should actually be able to work your skewer right through each piece, of course pushing into them very gently, and those will be able to slide along your skewer very lightly. Proceed to just do so. Of course use the aid of your pan. That should be able to allow for you to prick through your shrimp very simply. So this is only one way you could do it. So you can alternatively have those on a skewer like so and place those to one side of your dish. Or you can also alternatively just scoop up your prawns, scoop up your shrimp of course, and just spread them out right over the top of the dish. It will of course also look good, but remember, if you are trying to bring a bit of an appeal to the dish, remember over garnishing is never a problem. You're of course going to be bringing a bit of beauty to the plate, and no one ever notices the bit of effort that goes into that. But of course, if you're the one serving this very simple starter dish, you will actually be able to embrace the look of your plate right after, and you will actually enjoy the moment that you're looking for. So once more, just press onto the skewer, and you can be able to just set those to the side like that. And very simple technique to finish off as well. Sprinkle over some chili flakes. That does bring a beautiful burst of color. You can also just finely chop up some bit of some lemongrass. And remember, that always brings a freshness to the dish, and especially if you do this to a hot plate, it will of course bring up a bit of some lemongrass flavor. And you can of course finish this with a very gentle drizzle of some lemon juice. So I'm just going to squeeze some of that right over the top and right over the shrimp. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the last and final part of the show. I do hope you've managed to enjoy yourselves today as much as I did, and I hope you've managed to grasp and learn something that you can incorporate into your very own kitchen. But from my end, this is the last and final part of the show. I will thank you once again for tuning in this far, and until the next episode, do have a lovely evening, and God bless. Bye-bye.